I think we need to find a way of being indigenous and modern, as we need to be to learn to be both, actually. And so it's also a way of maybe a question, and that's what I've been also very interested is, what do I love about modernity, these modern times, about consumerism? It's an uncomfortable question, but there is something probably I also like. And it only, I think, these times can only die if we also recognize that, and what are the things that have been suffering from. There's also an uncomfortable, appreciation for the comfort that we have that is very destructive. But I think when we are in a privileged position, it's also recognizing that it's nice to go on holiday, take the plane, have the supermarkets full, and then that's when we'll also try to understand why people just like to be in the hamster wheel, right? So it's comfortable.
Welcome to Voices of Emergence. I am Rudy, and this is a space where inner transformation meets systemic change. Today, we're joined by Jean-Philippe Steeger, a narrative practitioner, dialogue facilitator, and researcher working at the intersection of complexity, culture, and consciousness. He is the founder of Perspectivist, a platform dedicated to polyphonic sense-making and systems innovation. With a background in international politics, philosophy, and organizational transformation, Jean-Philippe curates spaces for reflective inquiry, where multiple worldviews can meet in conversation. In this episode, we explore the body as a vessel of meaning, the role of queerness in regeneration, and the subtle choreographies that shape cultural change. Together, we ask, how do we communicate in ways that move people, build trust, and invite new forms of belonging? Welcome, Jean-Philippe.
Thank you for inviting me, Woody and Alex. And I'm pleased to have this conversation today with you.
Yeah, and my co-host is, of course, Alex. And I am so pleased also to be with Alex. And always his input is gold, and his wisdom of the Jungian frameworks and all that will be very handy today. So, Jean-Philippe, when you hear the word emergence, what arises in your body?
Right now, excitement. I'm really looking forward to our session today. And I think from what we shared before starting, there's a lot in the room. So I'm really looking forward to see what will emerge from our space and from the mingling of our different perspectives, as you also said in the introduction, Woody.
Jean-Philippe, so great to meet you. Tell me a little bit more about yourself and your life journey, and also the somatic aspect that I feel interests you, and what kind of stories live through your body and your somatic experiencing of the world.
Yeah, thank you, Alex, for the question. And for me, it has been certainly a journey of rediscovering the body, what is actually my relationship with my own body. And maybe it makes a good bridge to the session you had with Giles Hutchins, who spoke about the body as a vessel, of meaning making, as a vessel that connects us with the natural world. At the in-between, so to say, also of communities, of narratives, I would add. And my personal journey, I have grown up in Germany, and my parents are French Romanian, so grown up at the in-between of different cultures and ways of being in the world, whether it's food, right, using language, or many other things. So kind of also growing up with this sensitivity to different languages and to different cultures. I've grown up in a time where the kind of internet was just starting, and as I was a young queer boy, finding out about that, didn't even know what the word gay means, actually. So it was like, oh, that's what I feel is something bad. It's not normal. So there was a feeling of othering and kind of, okay, my place is at the edges. It's not in the center. And I think this experience, the kind of migration experience of my parents, and also the fact that I grew up with a kind of, a worldview that I would say is kind of alive and dynamic, that sees the kind of world as alive made that, that I had a lot of kind of othering experiences, which made me wonder what is my place. And that has a lot to do with the body, right? And because I could feel it always, is my presence, is my way of showing up appropriate, welcome here or not? And I think I hear this very often, don't perform, be natural. But what is this? And who can afford to have this luxury of saying that? Yeah, because I had to perform to be accepted, to be to just be, to be safe in the street, or not to be beaten up. So it's a different way of relating that comes from this othering experience, and it is related to my body. So I had to learn to claim space, to take space, to be visible, because I also know that kind of the young queer people, not like me, they will have someone to see and feel like, oh, I'm not alone in the world, because that was kind of the feeling that unfortunately I grew up in, was that, oh, you're alone in the world and there are not a lot of people like you. So actually the internet was what opened up a new world, and for meeting other people that were like me. Maybe fast forward to today, maybe just to stay on this kind of queer part of my history. When I look today at kind of dating platforms, it's like extracting the value from trauma of queer people, like platforms like Grindr that were used as a basis for Tinder. No, they came earlier. So it's extracting they're selling health data, they are remaking business with loneliness. And so I'm wondering, what is this, being in this posture of being other today? And that for me has a lot to do with, how do I show up? What is my embodiment? What is my posture? What are my gestures towards the others? What is the story that I want to share with you, right? Because there's not always perceivability, ability to listen, ability to receive and to be touched by these perspectives. And so there's probably, a lot of work to do there. And I think, all this questioning about what kind of power makes that I'm feeling like this made me really go into a journey of being very interested in the world of politics. So I was engaged in political movement, led a youth political movement. I was, quite engaged for a while. I also studied political sciences, and then I worked for 9 years in Brussels in EU affairs. So I wanted to change the world, no? Like many maybe in my generation said they wanted to change the world. And there I discovered, this is the reality of politics and policy making today. It's the further you go up the ladder, the less power you have, actually. You have to play the game. It's the king without clothes, right? So there I felt, this is quite a toxic environment often, this Brussels bubble. There's such a disconnection between the systemic level and the personal level. So when more into coaching, personal development, like, okay, how coherent am I actually? I'm taking the plane, am I eating meat, etc. So that was kind of okay, I need to be also walk the talk and be coherent. But at the same time, in this world of coaching that is very often one-on-one, that is a bit, when you go into a company in these cold, sterile office rooms, it just doesn't feel right to do this coaching. Then you're just left with a lot of desires of how it could be different, but you're just thrown back into this organizational system. So I was like, is this the solution, or is it maybe just part of the problem? And that's when maybe there was an opening to this more regenerative paradigm that I discovered also by joining Laura Storm's regenerative leadership journey. And where I felt, this is connecting the systemic and the personal, and the inner, the outer, the ecosystemic. And this is also what I do now with my work on regenerative communications, which I was drawn to from that space of this leadership journey, because I discovered, it's something more creative and also embodied that I want to do in my work. And that's maybe the gift of what I have to share. And maybe also maybe this kind of queer perspective of in-betweenness that I also bring in this. How do we weave between perspectives, between worldviews, between communities, etc. And and from that space, kind of, I decided also to create my agencies, Perspectivist and co-created agency restoried was from this place. Okay, how can we see communications as a living system? Because I have in my experience also felt the stories and the power of stories, or rather narratives. I would say narratives are kind of the cultural soil. So I felt in my family history, totalitarianism, there are fears I cannot explain with my own life experiences. And there are beliefs that have been, passed by onto me through education systems, through etc., from these narratives, from neoliberalism, from communism, from patriarchy as well, etc., etc. And how do I show up? What is my posture towards that? And that's why I'm very interested, in these kind of questions and asking if I want to live another story, where can I plant it? Where can I really kind of give life to my imagination and live in a safe, joyful way, right? Which is not a given for a few queer people, I would say. And that requires a kind of to nurture the cultural soil, the narrative soil, I think, and because there's a lot to be let go of, and a lot of modern myths that keep us from being fully alive, I think, and I know that you, Alex, and Rudi, you're doing this work as well, and I think it's how do we, and with this podcast as well, how do we hold space for this liminality and this also letting go to let come, right? So that's a big question. I would, with storytelling, with helping brands cross the kind of threshold, become a portal to make regeneration experienceable, to really build bridges between perspectives that have been separated historically through narratives that have been embodied and performed. Voila. So that's a little bit about me. In as an introduction.
That was a lot, Jean-Philippe. Thank you for that. It was already very broad. I want to unpack a little bit because I'm interested in the word that you mentioned, this in-betweenness. Yeah, how you grow up in this world of like polarities, mind, body, the beginning of the internet, which is very mindy, then your body or awakening, inner, outer, masculine, feminine, letting go, opening up to receive. They're all polarities, actually. And so how do you move like in between these polarities, and or how does it like, how does it manifest within you, of like masculine, feminine, queer, beyond identity, like as an energetic orientation in the field? And how does that then as a role of queerness play in regeneration? I imagine it opens doors to fluidity, complexity, collective healing. But I want to hear like from your personal perspective, like when did that happen? Like you said that the internet was an awakening. Like in the beginning, internet was an awakening for many people. I think it was also an openness to the world and to so much more and to so much diversity. But now we're in a total different, restriction, and we're going back to everybody who's fearful, and there's so many things on the internet that frighten us, so and how did we get here? So but how did you, or how are you experiencing this personally, and what does that mean for the choices you make then also professionally, like with regeneration?
Yeah, it's a big question, and how to hold polarity, and perhaps it's in this exploration also what are the polarities within me, right? And that I have felt in my own roots. For me, there was a big or what has helped me to explore these questions was a work of remembrance of my own roots. So last years I was really getting in touch with my Romanian roots, with my German ones and French ones. I lived 9 years in Brussels, which is kind of a very international city. But I felt like, I need to reconnect to the places I grew up in, and which brought me to see these mechanisms of othering, of historical, I would say injustices, and understanding where this actually comes from, and what is my relations towards that. How do I show up knowing this? And I think it's an emergent journey, I would say, and something is probably opening through that. It is, I think for me, it was a kind of a coming home in this edge perspective, but it was not a given. I think I had to understand, what does queerness actually mean to you? Is it just this identity, a negative identity, I would say, of being marginalized and remaining there? And one big eye-opener for sure was, and I grew up with a culture of books, was the book by Alan Downs, Velvet Rage, where he talks about, the kind of process as a queer person of healing the trauma, because for a long time you're in compensation mode. You're trying to be the best, the most beautiful, to try to compensate the inner lack. And so the work is really to cross a threshold to learn to love myself, which is an ongoing task. But I think it's only from that self-love, and in that case, from an edge perspective, that you can maybe also start forgiving the kind of, let's say, mainstream culture that has put me to the margin, and see what the trauma actually behind them is that made them to do this othering. So it's also, this being in this position makes also, now I can see clearly the other pole and where they're coming from. Yeah, so I think it's a really radical listening exercise, because I don't look at people the same anymore when I hear them say horrible things. I always try to kind of listen to what is behind, and that's what I call radical listening, is looking what is the genealogy of systems of oppression and division, narratives of separation that have been there. And this kind of accepting my queerness and saying, okay, that I don't want to be in this posture of a negative identity, also made me to wonder, okay, what is this story that they don't want us to tell about queerness? Is there maybe a bigger gift? And that also, again, brought me back to kind of the roots, which is that queer people traditionally have been shamans, healers, community weavers at this in-between, precisely. So there's maybe, archetypes also that have been, not always, of course, but like the shaman, that have been very queer in history. And I think it's kind of, I get a lot of nourishment and energy from knowing that there have been people embodying these archetypes. And I see it as my role as also recovering them and filling them with new life in the modern reality that we are in. So it is, in a way, kind of becoming comfortable at this at the edges somehow, sometimes, and paradoxically, this kind of assuming this and assuming my who I am in relation to, because I think we're always are and evolve in relation to, right? We're co-evolving, also makes me connect more to these people, because there's something they can resonate with. They can say, oh, that sounds familiar. That's something maybe I have also experienced, or I was on the other side, but I have also made my work and my peace, So I think there's that. And there's also, I would say, the reflection on interspecies solidarities, I would say. What does it mean to be queer in nature, in other species? And I have the kind of image of a mycelial network. They're kind of queer shape-shifting creatures going into new soils, transforming them, etc. So it's very interesting. I mean, for those that want to learn more, it's called Queer Ecology. So it's really looking at what are actually the kind of patterns that are repetitive. And for a long time, we have not documented homosexuality and transgender in nature, but now we know that there are so many thousand species that are, and it escapes this logic of, sexuality is there for reproduction, right? That's what we have learned in school. And no, nature is actually more abundant than that, and that creates, and this diversity creates stability. Actually, it creates buffers, it creates exchanges. Look at the queer movement today. I see so many colors. Black people, disabled people, all kinds of diversities coming together, and And so we are kind of a mycelium, and probably not the only one, but certainly I see this kind of role of reconnecting and nourishing the ecosystem, weaving in the ecosystem, and ensuring that where things have remained invisible, because this visibility thing I think is a big issue, what do we make visible, right? And I think there's a kind of sensing capacity of that. And I always feel it, like I hate it in the room when there's someone not, being able to talk. So I feel like, okay, I have to step into that role, because no one else does it, to create space for these persons that are, because of one reason or another, invisible governance mechanisms, not being listened to, not being seen, etc. So, and yeah, and there I think some archetypes, we talked about archetypes as well, with Alex. So I think there's also what kind of archetypes do we need right now, and maybe more, what is the relationship between these archetypes? What are the cultural constellations, what I would say, or cultural formation that we need to form? How can we embody collectively different ways of showing up, being in place, being in community, and doing this regenerative, transformative work together? So because mycelial intelligence is highly collaborative, but at the same time you trust some parts of the ecosystem to move further and take their own decisions. So there's this kind of a bit of consciousness of the bigger whole, so the collective body, so to say, which interests me a lot, and the movement and the dynamics of the collective bodies. And I see it as a kind of a space. So you asked about polarity, Woody. So if there's polarity, how do we exit this dynamics of monopolization, mass formation in a mass media age, right? These masses that are all running into the abyss right now. Because this is what's happening. They're all running into the abyss. Everyone is on the phone. And how do we change this dynamic? Yeah, and there are some pioneers that try to exit this dynamic. Yeah, and I think that's what we need to do as a choreography. We need to. It has been actually polarizing, right? And it's fragmenting, it's atomizing. So what do we do with these erratic movements and these non-synchronized, non-resonating relationships between each other, between communities, between organizations, between regenerative pioneers? I think we need to perceive each other, and we need to learn to do cultural choreographies together. That's what I feel is quite present for me at this moment, is really this question of collective embodiment, but dynamic embodiments. Yeah, so it's not enough to just slow down. What do you do after slowing down, after doing your retreat, after taking a break and recharging your battery? What are you going to do differently afterwards? And I think we need to think much more about that, and not be in this, okay, retreat, I do leadership retreat, then I go back to work, then I do leadership retreat, and so on. Yeah, so it's just taking the time out to survive the brutal reality of modernity, that so many people that have been othered have been suffering for very long. And I think it's also listening to these perspectives, indigenous people, disabled people, queer people, what they have learned from this experience, right? Because it's the same experience that we're now collectively experiencing through the colonization of our consciousness, through AI, etc. So really becoming interested in this kind of edge perspective. What does it mean to embody queerness? What does it mean to be in this shape-shifting? Is not a thing of being queer. It is. I think it's an energy that just exists in nature. And I think the question is, how do we learn that? How do we embody that? How do we show up with this, knowing that it's not there's not one way of embodiment, but so many. There's a spectrum of expression is very large, and I think we're just scratching the surface and learning a little bit. So I think, yeah, it's kind of an invitation of how do we broaden our way of showing up, of telling stories, of dancing, of etc. What makes life beautiful? What makes life lovable, etc. I could say much more about queerness, but maybe I will leave it there, because I'm sure, yeah, there may be things that you'd like to explore more or challenge and so on.
There's quite a lot there. And my question will be about community, but let me get there. It's interesting. I hadn't considered that queerness itself can be a type of archetype, an archetype of fluidity and also resilience, kind of an archetype of rebellion against systems that are too rigid. So that to me is interesting. You spoke about mycelial networks and also people who go to retreats and they learn something, but then they go back into the system. The system hasn't changed. They have changed, but now they're just an individual in a collective system that has not changed. And it's very jarring, or can be very difficult to navigate one's own internal change, in relationship to the collective, which is still hasn't changed yet. I think that's interesting. I myself am a third culture kid. My father was Brazilian. My mother is from Finland. I was born in Paris. He was a diplomat. So by the time I was 11, I had lived in 6 cities on 5 continents and spoke 5 languages. So the effect was very much like what you're saying, is that everywhere I went, I felt like the outsider, the foreigner. I was always learning about a new culture and trying to learn the codes so I could fit in, so I could shapeshift, code switch, be accepted. So it was a lot about how to show up. It was very performative, and it was a lot of like masking, like let me pretend now to be a certain way in order to fit in. So I totally understand that. And the interesting thing about mycelial networks is that if you put it on top of like an existing network, like a metro, like the Tokyo Metro, I think they studied, and they look at the existing Tokyo Metro and they calculate the efficiency, but then you put some food on the stops and you allow the mycelial network to form, it's more efficient than the existing network. And I find that somehow fascinating. So my question then is, what is the importance of community to you, and what does it mean to belong? And in a world that is so fragmented now, what practices or postures allow us to be in relationship again?
Beautiful question, Alex. And yeah, I think this experience of being an outsider is also something I hear a lot among, mainly sustainability or regenerative pioneers. Is maybe something, that has made us have the courage to go there and to do this work, because we want to leave behind a world where we can all feel maybe more in community. So so there's maybe this remembering the lost community, actually, the lost relationship to local community, the lost relationship to communities, where we can really fully flourish. For me, what has been the most insightful about community is experiencing community. So I found my way to queer community, which is really a space where I feel that I can show much more than anywhere else in the world. I can really explore my feminine and masculine sides without judgment. I can, explore what queerness actually means. What is maybe the sacred gift or medicine of queerness? There are, rituals, ceremonies, etc. So it's which help to connect to the heart space. So I think that's perhaps the most important practice, is this deep listening and without opinionating, without judging, and just becoming present to each other in a kind of community setting. And of course, also celebrations and drag shows, circus, theater, cabaret, and so on. So which is playing with with this kind of preconception of, okay, this is masculine, this is feminine, this is whatever we think, whichever categories we create to go there at the in-betweens and say, hey, I exist. It's, you tell me I don't, but here I am. And I don't want to say so many insights, but sometimes that also needs to be said. So really for me, this feeling of community and belonging is being seen, being held. I think the kind of solidarity is very important. What happens when I'm not well, right? Someone calling me, and to know that you have people that will support you in whatever circumstance, and I think that's just the most grounding and important thing that I have, I would say, in my life, is to know that, and that's where I want to invest my energy, my money, my my dedication on to nurture this community that has given me so much. So there's reciprocity, which is I think not the case for 90% of communities that claim to be communities, because most are transactional. You join it and you get something, but there's not the depth of care, the depth of witnessing, seeing each other, and also believing that we can, evolve together. We can actually create plays together. We can enchant plays. I think there's so much possible from community. I think that's the level we have to go back to, probably, is the level of community. Things emerge, and your podcast is called Voices of Emergence. I think things emerge from community. And there's so much in community, so much richness in community, that I feel is, but the challenge maybe today is because something is lost, is to make people gently long for being part of a community. There is something that they have been seeking, and no one is actually telling them. They're just telling them the compensation for this lack, which is modern marketing. So I think we need to have gentle invitations rather than pain pointing towards the lack that we're compensating on. Also on social media, of course. They have created, in a certain sense, contributed to loneliness, and then telling the solution to that loneliness. So I think that's the harsh truth, I would say, where we are with kind of community. A lot has been destroyed, and especially in Western Europe, I would say, and in the kind of the Western world, I would say. But it's probably, and I like what Michelle Holiday says about that, the first things that fascists do is destroying communities. And it's, I think, the task is to do who do we want to be with to weather the storm that is up on us right now.
Yeah, I want to dig a bit deeper in that, Jean-Philippe. Like you work in regeneration, regenerative communications. My feeling is that, since the last 6 months, or, there was a wave of, regeneration up to last year, let's say. And then there were lots of elections in Europe and then also in US. And we have seen all of a sudden everything changed. Yeah, so the whole dynamic changed. And so, for example, in Europe, in many countries, here in Belgium, in my personal, where I live, so the green actions and all that are not a priority any longer, because now the political party shifted, or the government shifted to the right. And in many European countries, it's like that. So while for intelligent people that know about innovation and science and technology and harm, what we are doing as harm to the planet, we can only, conclude that, we need to go into a greener economy. We need to go into regeneration in order to prepare the next wave. And I believe we are busy doing that. So this podcast is part also of the story that we're trying to tell of, like, what is emerging from this perspective. So, but according to you, why does regeneration so often remains in a bubble, like up to now? What keeps it from becoming a cultural current? And what needs to shift in how we communicate regeneration? Because that's maybe the problem, that there's no clear understanding about regeneration. And or people think that it's maybe too hippy-dippy, or we're going back into nature, so they don't understand that it has to do with innovation and renewing ourselves. So, how do we communicate regeneration, not just in the message, but in the medium and embodiment? And how do we bring that shift?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question that I've also been exploring, and I don't think I have the answers. I think but I have some reflections. I also created a framework on this kind of question of how do we make it resonate? How can we formulate invitation that could potentially resonate? But maybe to start with, you mentioned the Green Deal, Rudi, and I think also I've worked many years around the Green Deal. I've worked on sustainable leadership development, have managed an EU project on that. We trained hundreds of managers on sustainable leadership. Also because of the Green Deal, it was a window of opportunity. So there's a grieving for me and of course, a fear of what will happen to our forests, to our soils, to our blood, full of poison, etc. So it's heavy. It's very heavy, and it's like something is breaking and clearly showing its ugly face, very clearly, and that they don't give a damn about. Well, they just do their thing for the industry, and that's it. I think there was
Wait. Just a moment. Who is they?
the politicians that are deciding to abolish the Green Deal in the in the European Parliament, and it's of course not only them. It's pressure from the nation states, so it's much more complex, and also of course the pressure by the United States, by China. I mean, it's a very complex, of course, topic, but at the same time, I think many have believed in this Green Deal, and some have said, okay, this is doomed to fail. I was also optimistic. So there's grieving, and the question, what did we not want to see? Because I think the signs were there that this Green Deal was not very coherent. There were so many incoherences between environmental DG environment and DG economy and so on. I don't want to enter the details now, but I think there's a lot of grieving work now to do. So actually, I'm working with a friend who will host an event on grieving the Green Deal in September, because we feel it just needs space to digest and let emerge what is coming, because I don't think we have the solution right now. It's really sitting in with this destruction and witnessing it together. In the end, it's also our relationship to death, to end of cycles, and I think we are at the end of cycles, because I think the European Union has afforded its own hypocrisy for very long, and I think the narratives that have been orchestrated by PR are collapsing right now. I mean, people see that they're being bullshitted at, and unfortunately, what many don't know is how lobbying works. I've studied lobbying, so it is manufacturing reality. It is manufacturing truth. That's the kind of the job of a spin doctor, and you shape the narrative, you shape the public discourse, and now increasingly with AI and automated, and with labor in Serbia and in India doing the kind of botting and so on to support these points of views. So reality and truth are being massively attacked and dissociated. So these are the conditions, dissonant, polluted conditions that make it extra hard to communicate regeneration. But I think there are entry points, and that's what I'm exploring with what I call the resonance compass framework. And I think and the question was, what can touch us, right? Of course, this will be different for different people, but I think it's really at what level are we communicating with each other, and too often I think it's in transactional way. It's in, okay, what do I get out of it? What I call the practical value, which can still be important, because you want to know if you want to buy a service, what are you going to get by it? But it's not enough. So I think this kind of just marketing for good doesn't work if it doesn't change the logic. And I think it changes the logic when we start to remember and to go to something deeper, activate our body memory. What is this longing for the experiences we haven't had in life? Recently, I went to an exhibition by Wolfgang Tillmans. He's an amazing photographer based in Berlin, and he's been doing incredible photography. And for me, it is an homage to life. It is the diversity of life. What kind of experiences can you have? And I think it's doing that. And for me, that has something to do with, there's memory in the picture, something, from your childhood, or from your first love, or from, just being on a market. And it's just an amazing experience. There's also, in this longing, kind of an aspirational quality. What is the life that I want to have? And I think we need to be much more imaginative and speak to that, and make it really exciting for people to join that world, and to experience what community means, to experience what it means to fully explore your different talents. I don't know, your sexuality, your your artistic side and so on. So I think there's so much, you know, and probably we'd all have a different access to talk about that from our essence. But I think it's to be conscious about all these different aspects at different level that make people resonate with what we offer. And it's also not just out of the nowhere. I mean, we know that we have brain waves, and today we're often high beta, which makes that we're not receptive to this kind of work because we're too stressed. So if we're too stressed, we cannot receive a thing that, oh, slow down, slow down, slow down. And you hear it all the time. What does it do to you when you hear that all the time? So that's not the right way to communicate then, right? So we need to be really get more interested in the people we would like to work with, and to be really in a listening posture instead of being the expert that knows better and want to sell your point of view. Yeah, and I think that there's so much we haven't, we need to listen to rather than knowing better and saying how it should be done. Is looking, okay, there are people who've been working on this for so long. What could we learn from them, right? From indigenous people and so on. So I think it's, but that's not enough probably. So I think we need to find a way of being indigenous and modern, as Joshua Konkanku, whom I also work with, is saying. It's like we need to be to learn to be both actually, and so it's also a way of maybe a question, and that's what I've been also very interested is, what do I love about modernity, these modern times, about consumerism? You know, it's an uncomfortable question, but there is something probably I also like. And it only, I think these times can only die if we also recognize that, you know, and what are the things that have been suffering from also, of course. But I think there's also an uncomfortable, appreciation for the comfort that we have that is very destructive. But I think when we are in a privileged position, it's also recognizing that it's nice to go on holiday, take the plane, you know, have the supermarkets full, you know, and then that's when we'll also try to understand why people just like to be in the hamster wheel, right? So it's comfortable, it gives you certainty, it gives you purpose, it gives you you don't have to care so much about the education of your children because the school is taking care of it. You have a health system, so you don't need to. So I think we need to answer all these questions a bit better, and really become interested in the lives of the people that have not been listened to for a very long time, and the generations before have not been listened to, etc. So it's just the first time that they're maybe being really listened to and really being interested. Oh, I hear you. And that's not something that many have heard, neither in education, neither by the parents' education, in school education, and so on. If you want to be listened to, you have to go to a psychotherapist, book a coach, or well, I have been the privileged situation to have a friend group that really listens to you and welcomes your potential. So I think it's also becoming conscious of these privileges, and what am I actually giving? What am I giving my life into? What am I giving back actually, because I've received so much? So that's also a question that is quite present for me. This reestablishing a reciprocity, you know.
This reminds me very much of when I did my vision quest, and which is it's a 4-day ritual kind of, where you're alone in the forest in a little diameter you cannot step out of. So for 4 days you're there, no food, no water, no electronics, no books, nothing. It's just you with yourself. It's like a vipassana, but there's no structure. It's just 24 hours a day you're there alone in the forest. And what happened to me on the second day is I started feeling guilty. And I was wondering what's happening here. And the guilt is called a productivity guilt. And I had come before the vision quest from a very busy schedule. And afterwards, I was going back into a very busy schedule. But for 4 days, there was nothing scheduled. And I felt guilty. And I felt, wow, here I am. I'm in the forest. I cannot work. So I'm not working. I'm not productive in that way. But I'm also not consuming. Like if I were in vacation in Cancun or something, I would be consuming. But I'm not even productive as a consumer. I'm just here. And this to me was some like deeper indigenous wisdom that comes through the practice of doing it. So the indigenous doesn't actually tell you, but when you go through the practice, you understand, wow, I had a deep narrative and programming of being productive all the time. I live in a city, I have to be productive with a full schedule. And it really made me notice these deeper programs that I had. And so Rumi has a great quote. He says, why do you stay in prison when the door is wide open? And so like the stories we tell ourselves, the narratives we have can either imprison us or liberate us. So I wonder, do you feel like right now we're redefining some myths or narratives? Are we losing some narratives in this meta crisis? And are there new stories or archetypes that are emerging at this time?
I think that's such an important question, and because I think we've all grown up with these kind of modern myths of the lonely hero, right? I mean, we've seen it in all kinds of the same script in 1,000 variations in Hollywood movies. So I think that's also something constitutive probably for modern globalized culture, at least for our generations. Maybe the younger is less now. But I think we've all grown up with American culture. So that's the reference story, is the hero's journey. And in the end, there's so much that is not said in this myth. Is how are you part of community? How are you part of nature? What is it that you have been given? What is not the kind of overcoming the challenge and I'm the strongest, but rather what have I experienced and what do I want to share with others, right? So it's a bit of different kinds of stories that can emerge from that soil. And I think, can you repeat the question actually again? Sorry.
Or do we have like certain stories which are no longer relevant? And do we have new storytelling or new archetypes that are emerging at this time?
Yes. Yeah, I think we are in a time that in which the old narratives of superiority, of domination, the colonial narratives, the narratives of progress, narratives of othering are kind of breaking apart because they're simply so proven wrong by the reality of social media, which is just a lot of diversity, and that there are things are not matching. So the stories don't work anymore because becoming more conscious about the universe, although there are also, of course, all the exploitative and extractive practices. But I think still the internet is reflecting this consciousness, I think. And as these kind of narratives, I think, are slowly dying, I think we need to also, how do we relate to them? How do we relate to modern narratives? How can we be gentle and playful with this? How can we create liminal spaces to welcome new stories? But since I think we're at this time of transition, of endings, it's the story of endings. How do we tell stories of grieving? And it's a time of kind of pioneers that are already preparing, I would say, their seeds for what's to come after, kind of this collapse phase. So, and I think it's pioneers already starting. We have a lot of regenerative pioneers doing amazing work. So they are already there, the kind of pioneer story. But I think there will be many more. And I think also making them visible and learning from them on how do you grow new seeds on this kind of sealed, hard, asphalted soil of modernity. It's not just the surface in a material sense. I mean, now half of the planet's mass is anthropocentric, right? But it's also, I think, in the invisible dimension, probably also more than 50% are asphalted plastic, of these narratives. They're hard. They're leading, and literally in our bodies, it's hardening us. It's distancing us. We're not allowing ourselves to feel. We're in a golden cage. Yeah, there's many different situations of what it means to be modern today. So I think some stories need to break through. They need to be courageous, like the trickster archetype, provocative, break things. But you can not stay in this too long. You need to move on, otherwise it will burn you out. So I think that's what I mean with cultural choreographies. It's embodying this role, getting out of it, and embodying a new role in a different situation. to learn this collectively. Yeah, what is appropriate in this situation, this place, in this organization. Many people don't know how to show up in a multinational. Not what to say and what your strategy is, but how do you actually show up? How is your voice? How are you being? How do you take space in this space? And people will feel so much. You don't need to say anything. It's about showing up. Yeah, and I think that's important to be there. So it's really embodying these new stories. But I think the stories are important to give us. Template is maybe not a good idea, but the cultural repertoire that you can inspire yourself from on ways of showing up. So it's maybe a storied choreography, so to say. So to really, okay, what is the scenario? What are the characters that are needed to transform the situation? Okay, let's do it. Let's try it, and then let's go for it. Let's do it. And so I think it probably the stories are really that we'll hear will be much more doing alignment between kind of an aspiration, between how we imagine the future of the place, of the community, of the ecosystem, and how are we embodying that, and what is actually the genealogy, the history of how we got there that will inspire us and help us to show up actually. So what are the roots we can connect us to? So stories that are much more embodied maybe than the kind of, just reading something in a book, which can also be powerful. I don't want to say this. I grew up with a lot of great books, but I think it's really this interplay between story and embodiment. And I think stories come to us. It's more that we're not creating stories, but stories are coming to us, and we can either embody them or reject them, but they will come back anyway. So I think they are there to stay for us. They have something to tell us much more than just being heard and consumed, right? It's a different relationship also to story that we're doing. And after these kind of pioneer stories, I think there will be other stories that will have a bit of kind of grow deeper roots, but we're not there yet. So I think now we need stories that can be spread quickly. I think we need more viral strategies, get inspired by nature. How can we become viruses? Because viruses have an important ecological function as well, and so and some things do need to die. So I think how can we embody being viruses, right? Or so many other species. But to think a little bit about also those who listen know, and if you're in a certain situation, what are the kinds of embodiment and qualities that I'm looking for actually, and how can I get inspiration from nature? Of being that. So I think it's really not the kind of examples, stories, etc. that we need, but it's more our capacity to listen to them, to be able to perceive them, that we need to work on.
Thank you, Jean-Philippe. We just passed the hour, I see. So, but as a last question, I want to be respectful also to the listeners' time. I want to have a question on, the sign of the times, AI, and how do you see the future of AI and the future of like our relational intelligence? Will it be with AI, or will we go back without AI, or will AI be dominated by some authoritarianism? And how does that relate to queerness? Is there a queer AI? I don't know. How do you query with AI? Because I know that ChatGPT is considered as more woke than, for example, Grok. Yeah. So, and there's all these different types of AI that are being developed, that will all have their own network and values and purpose and business model behind, of course, behind, because it's all about a lot about business. I haven't really found yet. I did some programs myself with AI, and there's a lot of youngsters now using AI for personal growth. But the more I work with it, I question it also more and more of like, what are we actually doing? Yeah. So, and where are we going with this? And I think because now we are still in this Wild West, nobody really knows. But I want to know from your perspective, and also in regenerative. I know there's also regenerative AI. So, but how do you see your future? You're much younger than us. So how do you see your future with AI? As a last question, huh?
Yeah, that's really a story of our time. And before, I think, like exploring this question, I think we also need, again, to remember where AI actually comes from. And so, I mean, there are a lot of engineers, scientists, mathematicians that have worked on developing AI. I'm thinking about Alan Turing. He has built his Turing machines that has beaten the Nazis because he couldn't have a boyfriend because homosexuality was illegal. So the substitution of love by the machine was kind of what has driven AI, among others. Yeah. And when I see how young people are using AI today for self-therapy, and I can't stop, I just cannot think that this is actually the energy of this technology. It's the substitution of love and proximity and community. And at the same time, I see the opportunity. I don't want to be anti-technology at all. What I just see is that the big majority of AIs today are based on the consciousness of big tech billionaires and the developers teams that are treating them like gods. That's very dangerous. And I have written a report on totalitarianism reloaded, on futurist ideologies that are driving much of the investment and the thinking behind it. And this is not a future I want to live in, and it's a future I actually fight against, or I'm fighting for a different future. I think yes, probably regenerative AI is possible, but it needs to come from a space where we are. This is the future we imagine. This is how we want to change this place, and this is how AI could contribute to that, but not to start with the technology. And I think that's what we do. We're starting with the technology. Oh, it will fix our problems, and basically just creating new problems. So so to be really mindful and conscious about what we actually want to do. And I think that's not the case in most cases. I think it's also, I mean, most have very business interest in this. I think what Switzerland is doing now with a public or AI for public good is a very different model. So that gives me hope for sure. But if I look at most other models, you know, I just found out that not only do you give your data away to the AI company, but later you can even, be pursued in court by states for having given this information. So so basically that's very perverse, right? I mean, first you trust the kind of technology, and then the state comes and punishes you for that. So it's like it's very weird, and I think that I hope this all will bring us back to real life encounters, to community, etc. But I don't think that AI has the right questions. It maybe has answers, but that's not what we need right now. I think what we need right now is not more knowledge, but real wisdom, and that's where I think we're gonna go towards more of a wisdom economy. Because we're just realizing that everything is falling apart. No one can see the big pictures. We don't have generalists anymore. We don't have people who can think a bit bigger. We don't have, companies are not hiring people that are relational anymore because because it just doesn't fit, and so on and so on. But I think we will at one point we realize, we need the people that have actually competences. Because it's just breaking apart, and we cannot just replace everyone. So maybe, of course, AI is also the question of who are we as humans? Who could we be? And at the same time, it's kind of, I hear this story so often. I'm like, be human. Yeah, but what were we before? Were we not human? Is it like, are you just rediscovering your humanity now with artificial intelligence? I think there is this genealogy that we don't talk about, of why AI is there and why we talk about being human, because I think we're becoming robots before AI can take over. So we're already embodying the practices of becoming more and more robotic so that AI can actually control our lives. So that's how it happens. It's not AI is so strong, we give it the power to be strong and dominate us. And I think that's important to understand. And only then can we create other AIs, I think.
Thank you, Jean-Philippe. This was really enriching. Alex, do you have a closing word or question maybe? Still?
Yeah, no, this was really, really good, Jean-Philippe. So good to meet you. Thank you for the time. And it was a very good conversation.
So, and just as an outro, if there's one seed you could plant right now, what would it be?
I mean, I would say it's seeds of love, of course, but I think that's a bit too general. So
No, it's actually not, because many of the people we are interviewing, they all come to the same conclusion.
Mm.
We need the seed of love, so.
Mm. And I think it's really, not to make it much longer, but I think that there's a heart intelligence. You know that how life starts when the first thing that happens is not that the brain starts working, it's the heart's starting to beat. And I think we need this beating of the heart again to launch this, to make people, oh, yeah, there is something. And the heart also unites polarities, right? So it's the right and left chamber. So it's also I'm challenging myself, how can I listen more to people who are, I don't think, share my opinion, my worldview, etc. So it's always learning and being like, yeah, there is something to learn, to listen, to receive, and this will make me grow as well. And then together we'll become a more vibrant heart, etc. Right? So invitation to listen to the heart, I guess. Yeah. And thank you so much, Woody and Alex. It's been really lovely. I hope we can continue the conversation somehow.